That is a parade put on by the Taliban celebrating the incredible generosity of the Harris-Biden administration. How kind of them. Yesterday was the 3-year anniversary of the absolute debacle known as the Afghanistan withdrawal. Now, let me just be clear here. I think that most people knew and agreed, Republican and Democrat, that it was time to end America's presence in Afghanistan. That's not up for debate. What's up for debate is how it was executed. And by any objective reasoning, what Joe Biden did in Afghanistan 3 years ago this week was an absolute and total disaster. And the perfect display of how disastrous it was happened at Bagram Air Force Base as the Taliban put on a parade of military might, showing their triumphant military prowess with all that incredible, powerful war-making machinery that we used to own, that we paid for. Your tax dollars paid for all of that, every single item there. That is billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of American military equipment just abandoned, left there. That is a parade put on by the Taliban celebrating the incredible generosity of the Harris-Biden administration. How kind of them to give the gift of all of this military power and might to a friendly nation like Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. It's also a perfect display of Kamala Harris's geopolitical and military wisdom. Because let's not forget, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were like this with all of the strategies that went into play for the Afghanistan withdrawal. And this right here is the perfect demonstration of their skill. This is what 4 years of Kamala Harris in the White House will bring you. This is a gut punch to anyone who either served over there or knows someone who served over there, and certainly anyone who was a casualty or knows someone who was a casualty in Afghanistan. It's one thing that we had to leave without fully finishing the job. It's another thing to hand our arsenal over to the very people who we tried to defeat. We had a list of equipment here that I found quite instructive. 12,000 Humvees, 42,000 trucks, 1,000 armored vehicles, 78 planes or helicopters, 350,000 rifles, 16,000 night vision goggles, 160,000 radios, and much more. And for anybody out there who's watching this saying, well, it was Trump's idea to leave and he wouldn't have done anything differently or anything like that. Well, let me remind you, because after this happened, Donald Trump, before he announced his candidacy for election this year, back in 2022, I believe it was, he was speaking at an event in Mar-a-Lago after these horrific events of 2021, this pullout. And he was commenting on conversations he had with General Milley. You see, when Donald Trump was planning the withdrawal of Afghanistan, he had meetings with his national security advisor, Ambassador O'Brien, Secretary of State Pompeo, his defense secretary, and of course, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley. And apparently, according to this retelling by Donald Trump, General Milley said, yeah, it would be better to leave all the equipment there. Let's remind ourselves of Donald Trump's reaction to that advice.
You got a $50 million airplane. You got a $29 million gorgeous helicopter. We had every type of helicopter. Many of them brand new, literally out of the box. $50 million planes. You mean you think it's cheaper to leave it there so they can have it than it is to fill it up with a half a tank of gas and fly it into Pakistan or fly it back to our country? You think, yes, sir, we think it's cheaper, sir. That's when I realized he was a idiot.
I'm sorry.
That's the only natural human reaction. It'll be cheaper for us to leave it all there, said General Milley. And Donald Trump, as commander-in-chief, well, you heard what he had to say. Joe Biden, on the other hand, got the same advice from General Milley. And Joe Biden said, brilliant. But wait, let me check with my number one advisor, the last person I want in the room. Kamala, what do you think? Sounds brilliant to me. These are the people who lead us right now who want 4 more years. You should be outraged. You know who else is outraged? Representative Jim Banks. He served in Afghanistan. He was at that event earlier today with J.D. Vance, members of the military who were talking about where things stand right now and how bad it might be should Kamala Harris and Jim Walz take over. Here's what he had to say as an Afghan vet.
3 years ago from today, it was today, 3 years ago, that Afghanistan officially fell to the Taliban. And yesterday, as both of my colleagues pointed out, the Taliban celebrated by parading our military equipment left behind by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris through the streets of Afghanistan. I believe it's one of the most embarrassing moments in American history, and it happened on Kamala Harris's watch. In fact, Kamala Harris said herself, and I'll quote, that she was the, quote, last person in the room. Never forget this. She bragged about being the last person in the room when they ordered the Afghanistan withdrawal. Say what you will about Tim Walz. He wasn't in that room. He definitely wasn't in Afghanistan. But Kamala Harris was, and she was directly responsible for a moment that will be a stain on this country for many years to come. She doesn't deserve a promotion. She deserves to be held accountable for what she's done.
That's true. And actually, nobody has been held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan. Nobody's been held accountable for the death of the 13 service members who were flown back there. Their plane had to do a U-turn midair to go back to provide security because people were jumping out of airplanes or trying to get into airplanes during the desperate last moments of the American presence there. Nobody's been held accountable for the death of those 13 service members at Abbey Gate when our military geniuses decided to rely on the Taliban to provide security. And, well, we see how that worked out. But there is an opportunity to hold somebody accountable. This November on Election Day, you can hold Kamala Harris accountable. You can send her a message. And it's not hyperbole, and it's not just, politics. It's not finger pointing to say that this is her fault, that she had a hand in this, as you just heard from Congressman Banks. And if you don't believe him, listen to her own words. She was bragging about being the last person in the room with Joe Biden. She was bragging about it.
President Biden always said that he wants you to be the last person in the room, particularly for big decisions, just as he was for President Obama. He just made a really big decision. Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do.
Not just comfortable, proud. You see the pride in her face? Absolutely, she does. I'm sure she'll try to walk it back at some point. Oh, well, that was Joe. I didn't have anything to do with that. I don't think so. And I know. There's nothing you can do. There was no good way to get out of there. It was going to be messy either way. Really? Well, let's remind you of how Donald Trump handled the Taliban when he had the opportunity. Congressman Wesley Hunt, an Army veteran, West Point graduate, now member of Congress, but at the time, he, I believe, was an advisor through the Pentagon for military affairs. Wesley Hunt tells a story about his observations of Donald Trump's direct participation with the Taliban negotiation. Watch this.
Give you my favorite President Trump story. This is my number one favorite of all time. When we were negotiating with the Taliban, while President Trump was still the president, President Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan, but he wanted a conditions-based withdrawal, meaning that you do what we tell you to do, and then we will start pulling troops back slowly as long as you abide by our rules. It's President Trump and Mike Pompeo, and they are talking to Taliban leadership in the room, and they had one translator in the room. President Trump looked at the Taliban leader and said this: "I want to leave Afghanistan, but it's going to be a conditions-based withdrawal." And translator translated. And he said, "If you harm a hair on a single American, I'm going to kill you." And the translator goes, and Trump goes, "Tell him,
Yes.
tell him what I said. Tell him what I said." Reached in his pocket, pulled out a satellite photo of the leader of the Taliban's home and handed it to him.
Shut up.
Got up and walked out the room.
And that story has been corroborated by multiple national security professionals who worked in the Trump administration. That's how that's how Trump handled the Taliban. You touch one American soldier, I will kill you. Here's a satellite photo of your home. You have a good day. Everybody knows what happened with this withdrawal, and everybody knows who's responsible. And yeah, no one's been held accountable, but we have an opportunity. And if you don't want to vote Kamala Harris and Joe Biden out of office to hold them accountable, well, why don't you consider your vote based on the current state of affairs in this world and show some level of respect for the American military, the men and women who serve, who have served and are continuing to serve this country, because they deserve better in a commander-in-chief. Let's wrap this up with Mark Geist, who speaks on behalf of those men and women. Mark Geist is a military veteran, and he, in fact, was one of the last people on the ground in Benghazi. He survived Benghazi. He then went on to co-write 13 Hours, co-wrote the 13 Hours that ended up as the movie about the events in Benghazi. And he was reflecting on multiple aspects of the Biden-Harris foreign policy right now and the hotspots around the world brought on by this administration.
Mark, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. There's so much going on in the Middle East, and we can't forget that it's been over a week now since that Iranian-backed group launched a strike against our base in Iraq, our Al-Assad Air Base, injuring 7 of our U.S. personnel. We have yet to respond to that attack. Why not? And what message does that send?
You know, I think the reason for it is the current administration, Biden-Harris administration, is trying to play that middle of the road and appease both sides and not be decisive in their actions, which we've seen that for the history of the Biden administration. And unfortunately, that doesn't play well in the Middle East. The Middle East, Hamas, Israel, also Iran, what they respect is firm, strong leadership, and we don't have that, and that's one of the problems.
Yeah, and on that front, it has been 3 years, if you can imagine, since our withdrawal from Afghanistan when the Taliban took over, and they marked the anniversary by holding this parade and celebration at our former base, Bagram Air Base, and they showed off all the military vehicles. They paraded them down the street that we left behind. This is clearly supposed to be a slap in the face to all Americans, but in particular, those who served in that war. When you look at this, I mean, what do you think?
I think it's a abhorrent disrespect to the service of so many Americans that served there. The fact that we left all of this equipment back there is ridiculous. And again, 3 years later, you know, we're seeing them parade it in front of us, just basically slapping us in the face that, you know, look what we've got here now. We spent from 2001 till 2023, basically, we fought that war to get the Taliban out. And now we just left in a way that allowed them to take everything back over and set not only that country back to what it was in 2001 with their, you know, anti-women approaches, all of that kind of, and those, you know, distinct policies that they have. And now do this in front of us is just ridiculous and should have never happened.
Well, it shouldn't have ever happened, but we can right that wrong now. We have just 90 days until the election. Early voting starts next month in some states. We're in it right now. And, I hear a lot of lip service sometimes from people who claim that they love our troops and they say, thank you for your service, and there's a lot of flag waving. People post pictures on their Facebook page on Memorial Day or on Veterans Day. And that's about the beginning, middle, and end of it, right? I've been able to meet a lot of people who have served and who are veterans. And I always talk to them. It's like, wait, is it weird when people thank you for your service when you're at the airport? And they go, yeah, it's awkward. It's nice, but I don't know what to say sometimes. What I'd like to say to them, I hear, is, you don't have to thank me for my service, but I would really appreciate you giving us civilian leadership that actually makes it so that our service is honored appropriately by making sure that crap like that doesn't happen again. You don't have to thank me for my service, these guys will tell you. But let's just make sure that the service wasn't in vain. Let's get the leadership that our country and our world deserves and put America back where it belongs. That's frankly better than a thank you.